At first, I thought it was just a bad joke. A piece of paper in the mailbox, stamped in red, demanding $250,000 in HOA fees for a piece of land that belonged to my family for nearly 7 decades. I laughed. Until I looked up and saw the tennis courts, the clubhouse, and the walking paths, built right on the pasture where my grandfather used to run his cattle. They weren't just demanding money, they had invaded. They thought I would stay silent, that I'd comply, that I'd turn. The other cheek like so many others had. They were wrong, because what they didn't know was they just messed with the wrong guy. My name is Jake Morgan, and on that miserable Monday morning, I received a letter that I thought was some sick prank, until I saw it was stamped, notarized, and hand-delivered to my mailbox by some guy in a white golf cart wearing a plastic badge that read, Civic Lakes HOA Enforcement Officer. The content, a demand to pay $250,000 in unpaid HOA fees for a ranch that's been in my family since 1953. I laughed. Honestly, I laughed like a lunatic on my porch, thinking I was on some hidden camera show. But my laughter died the moment I looked up and saw it. Just beyond the trees where the creek cuts through the north field, a gated clubhouse, a brand new tennis court, a children's park with colorful swings, all built right on my land. The letter slipped from my fingers onto the wooden porch floor. My eyes followed the freshly installed metal fencing, then the concrete path that now carved through the very pasture my grandfather ran cattle through in the 1960s. No way, I muttered, backing up, heart pounding. This was the field I once camped on with my father, where I learned to ride horses, where I sat for hours in the hay watching my grandfather fix hooves. And now, a group calling themselves the Civic Lakes HOA board had built a tennis court on it and sent me a 6-figure invoice. This wasn't a mistake. This was trespass. I hadn't even made it back inside when a knock came. No, a pounding at the door, hard, purposeful. I opened it, and there she was. A woman in her 50s, bright dyed red curls, khakis, and a neon pink polo shirt with an HOA logo the size of a fist. She stood with her hands on her hips, lips pursed like she just stepped in manure. "Mr. Jake Morgan?" she asked, voice syrupy sweet like icing over a lump of coal. "What's this about?" I replied, hand still on the door. "You have 7 days to remit payment. Otherwise, we'll begin lien proceedings under Clause 14B of the Civic Lakes HOA Charter." I raised an eyebrow. "Lien proceedings?" She was threatening to put a lien on my ranch? I let out a laugh, a cold, sharp one. Then I stepped down the 3 porch steps, met her face to face, and pulled out a satellite map I had just printed less than 10 minutes prior. A Google Earth map, clearly marked with county-recorded property lines. "You're standing on my land," I enunciated every word. She frowned. "I don't understand what you mean." I pointed to the map. "Your tennis court cuts straight across my grandfather's north field. This land belongs to my family. I've got the deeds. I've got the will. I've got the maps. All you people have is a plastic badge and a stack of worthless paper." And at that moment, the match was lit. She clenched her jaw, said nothing, then turned and walked off. Not in defeat. No. I saw it in her eyes. She wasn't backing down. Because she thought she had power. What she didn't know was, I'm not someone who scares easily. I'm Jake Morgan. I've survived Montana blizzards, worked oil rigs, and fired warning shots on the Pecos River to chase poachers off my grandfather's land. And I wasn't about to let a bunch of golf cart riding, polo shirt wearing HOA zealots fence off my land and call themselves the law. Not this time. Not on my land. I didn't come back to East Jasper to start a war. I came back because my father died. After 20 years up in Oregon working tech, I flew home to Texas thinking I'd stay a week, maybe 2. Long enough to clean up the ranch, sign the probate, papers, lease it out to a local, and disappear back into the concrete jungle. That was the plan. But plans don't mean a damn thing when you step off a plane and find out the world has moved on without you. The ranch sat on 210 acres of sunburned grass, cedar trees, and cracked fences older than I was. It had been in our family since 1953. The Morgan Ranch. My grandfather built it with his hands. My father died on it with his boots on. I figured I'd keep the name, settle the books, and get out. But the second I turned off the main road, I knew something was off. There was a massive stone monument where the old mailbox used to be. Civic Lakes Estates, EST 2018. All caps, all arrogance. I slowed the truck, eyes narrowing. The gravel road I used to race down as a teenager, now it was freshly paved, lined with trimmed hedges and speed bumps on ranch land. And then I saw them. People I didn't know. Walking dogs, pushing strollers, biking with their kids on my driveway. I had to tap the brakes just to avoid a toddler on a scooter. I parked by the barn, stepped out, and stood in silence. Where the hell was I? On day 3, it got worse. A bright orange notice was stapled to the barn door. HOA violation, non-compliant landscaping. Section 9AI stared at it like it was written in another language. Landscaping standards. This is a working ranch, not a golf course. At first I laughed, then I got mad, then I drove. The HOA office sat behind their new tennis court in what looked like a portable classroom dressed up to look official. I walked in. The receptionist, a young woman chewing grape gum like it owed her money, didn't look up. She slid a packet across the desk without a word. Community guidelines 2 inches thick. Glossy cover. Color-coded tabs. Why am I getting this? I asked. She blew a bubble. Popped it. If you live in Civic Lakes, you're part of the HOA. I don't live in Civic Lakes, I said slowly. This is Morgan Ranch. Been here since your entire neighborhood was still swamp and mosquitoes, she shrugged. The map says otherwise. Those 4 words changed everything. I felt it, deep in my gut. Something was very, very wrong. I went home and pulled out every box my father ever left behind. Tax records, deeds, surveyor notes. I didn't sleep. I lined them up beside satellite maps, county plots, and Google Earth overlays. And that's when I saw it. The Civic Lakes map didn't just stretch into our property by mistake. It was designed that way, intentionally, manipulated. Their official version shifted the southern boundary line nearly 200 feet north, and right there, smack in the middle of that stolen land, were the tennis court, clubhouse, and playground. They had built without asking. Every inch was mine. The next morning, I drove straight to the county office. Took me 6 hours and 3 cups of awful lobby coffee before I got someone to listen. A week later, a county surveyor named Joe came out in dusty boots and a baseball cap that said, "Don't tread on me." He tapped a stake into the dirt with his heel. "Your fence line is 21 feet north of the legal mark," he said. He turned, looked at the tennis court, then looked back at me. "HOA is about to have a really bad day. I thought that would be the end of it. Legal proof. County documents. Done deal." But I was wrong. That was just the start. Because the next morning I woke up to the sound of heavy machinery. Beep, beep, beep. Right outside my bedroom window, I looked out. A bulldozer. Parked dead center in my driveway, I threw on my boots and ran out the door. "What the hell is this?" I barked. A guy in a yellow vest glanced up from his clipboard. "Morning, sir. We're clearing the front line for uniform fencing. HOA directive." I stared at him, jaw clenched. "Whose authority?" "Civic Lakes HOA," he replied casually. I stepped forward, close enough to smell the diesel off his vest. "This is Morgan Ranch, pal. You're trespassing." He hesitated. Eyes darted. Picked up his walkie. But it was too late. Behind him, 4 more trucks rolled in, carrying posts, concrete mix, and even a damn portable toilet. They were here to erase my identity, pour concrete over my family's legacy, and stake claim to land. They didn't own. That's when I knew this wasn't ignorance. It was a hostile takeover. I didn't knock. I kicked the damn HOA office door open so hard the bell above it screamed like it wanted no part of this mess. A woman stepped out from the back, calm as ever, sipping coffee from a mug that said, Dagwawan Director. She wore the same pink HOA polo as the one who came to my house, the same smug energy, too. Linda Baxter, the queen bee of Civic Lakes. Mr. Morgan, she chirped, like we were old friends. That's quite the entrance. I slapped the county survey down. On the front counter so hard her coffee nearly spilled. You built your private country club on my land. She didn't flinch. Didn't even look at the papers. Our map says otherwise, she said coolly, tucking her hair behind one ear like she was brushing off the truth itself. I leaned in. Your map, I growled, was drawn by liars. This one, I tapped the official document, was drawn by the county. Linda took a slow sip of coffee. Then sue us. Those 3 words. They weren't just a dismissal. They were a challenge. And I knew exactly what they meant. She was betting I couldn't afford to fight. And she wasn't wrong. My inheritance had just cleared probate. The bank account barely had enough to cover repairs, taxes, and a few vet bills for the livestock. I hadn't even decided if I was going to keep the ranch. She knew all of that. Hell, someone probably told her. Because the HOA, they weren't stupid. They were organized, funded, armed with lawyers and paper shields and bad faith. And now they were using my land, billing me for it, and threatening to seize what generations of Morgans had built. I walked out of that office boiling, shaking, and that's when I knew this wasn't just about land anymore. It was about leverage. That night, I sat at the old dining table in my dad's log cabin, the same table he used to read the morning paper at, the same one we carved our initials into when I was 8. I stared at a manila folder filled with maps, deeds, and satellite images. I was outgunned and outfunded, but I wasn't out of options. There was one number I hadn't dialed in years. Uncle Tom, retired Navy JAG, hard as iron, sharp as barbed wire. He once won a land dispute in South Dakota, with nothing but a pocket knife and a copy of the Constitution. He picked up on the second ring. Jake, he said, it's been a while. Yeah, I replied. I need your help. I told him everything, from the fine to the bulldozer, from Linda's smirk to the stolen land. Tom laughed for a solid 10 seconds. They built on your property, then charged. You for it? That's the dumbest scam I've ever heard. It's not a scam if I can't stop them, I said. He got serious fast. His voice dropped into that calm, commanding tone I remembered from when I was a kid. Listen to me. You don't need a fight. You need leverage. That word again. Leverage. Something to tip the scale, to make them blink, to make them back down before I even stepped foot in court. Tom gave me the number of a property rights attorney he knew from his days in the service. Said she had shark teeth and a love for using corrupt boards. Her name was Sarah Bennett. And when she called me back that night, her first words were, I read your documents. They messed with the wrong cowboy. I liked her already. We met the next day. She looked like she belonged in a courtroom and a rodeo at the same time. Cowboy. Boots, tailored blazer, and a silver pen that clicked like a weapon. First thing, she said, don't argue with them. Don't send letters. Don't yell. Just document. Everything. So I did. I bought trail cams, mounted them on fence posts and tree lines. I filmed every truck that crossed the boundary, every contractor who parked on my soil, every child ran, through the pasture that once held my family's cattle. Then we sent a certified cease and desist to the HOA office. They ignored it. Of course they did. Instead, they doubled down. A week later, I got another envelope. Thicker this time. Late payment penalty, $15,000 total. Due, $265,000 and a new line, bolded in red. Livestock must be removed within 48 hours due to public safety risk. Animal control will be contacted. I read that line 3 times. They were trying to evict my cows now. I looked out the window at Old Blue chewing hay like he'd lived through 6 wars and didn't give a damn. Public safety risk? You've got to. Be kidding me. But I didn't explode. Not this time. I smiled, because Linda and her pink polo mafia just made a fatal mistake. They thought they were squeezing a man, but they were backing Morgan into a corner. And that corner, that's where we do our best fighting. I was sipping coffee on the porch when I heard it. Not birds, not cattle. A car door slamming. I stood up fast. At the edge of my driveway, 5 people stood side by side. 3 of them wore matching pink shirts with Civic Lakes HOA embroidered, like they were part of a country club cult. One of them, of course, was Linda Baxter. The 4th man wore a sheriff's badge. And that last one? A clipboard-holding punk with a GoPro on his chest like he was filming an episode of How to Lose a Lawsuit. Linda raised a bright pink folder in the air like a victory flag. "We're here to serve an official notice of property seizure, due to non-payment," she announced, voice loud enough for my cows to hear. I stepped down the porch stairs slowly, carefully, the way my dad taught me to approach a rattlesnake. The sheriff looked uncomfortable, real uncomfortable. "Do you have your own documents, Mr. Morgan?" he asked. I nodded. "Follow me." I brought him inside, sat him at the table where I'd once carved my initials, and handed over a thick binder. County deeds, surveyor reports, the cease and desist, the court filings. He flipped through the pages with quiet professionalism. Then he stood, walked back out to Linda, and said 4 words I'll never forget. "I'm not seizing anything." Linda's face turned a shade of red Crayola doesn't even have a name for. "But the board voted," she began. "Doesn't matter." The sheriff cut her off. "This isn't clear-cut. This is going to court. Boom, first, real, win." It didn't stop them, but it slowed them down. It bought me time. Time I needed to prepare for war. That night, Sarah came over. We laid out documents like generals planning. An invasion. She'd already filed the quiet title lawsuit, a formal legal request to settle the land ownership once and for all. "Don't expect this to be quick," she warned. "They'll stall, delay, hope you give up." "I won't," I said. "This land's got my name in the dirt. 30 days. That's how long we had before our first court date. But in those 30 days, the HOA didn't sit still. They started circling. SUVs driving by slow. People are photographing my fences. Contractors with measuring tapes. Someone even stuck a little red flag into one of my oak trees. I pulled it out and lit it on fire. Then, one morning, I woke up to something worse. Front gate, padlocked. Not by me. A metal sign hung crooked off the bars. Entry restricted, HOA jurisdiction. My stomach turned like I'd swallowed gravel. I called Sarah. She didn't even let me finish the sentence. "They can't lock you out of your own property," she snapped. "Cut it, film it, document everything." So I did. I took bolt cutters, walked right up to that gate and sliced it open on camera. The clank echoed across the pasture like freedom ringing. I held the sign in my hand, stared at the camera, and said, "You don't own this." You never did. I emailed the footage to Sarah, the county clerk's office, and, on impulse, Channel 9 News. Didn't think they'd care. I was wrong. Next afternoon, I got a call. "Mr. Morgan, this is Katie from Channel 9. We've heard about the HOA land dispute. Would you be willing to speak on record?" At first, I hesitated. I wasn't looking to be famous. I was looking to be left alone. But then I thought of the bulldozers, the $265,000 fake bill, the padlock, Linda's smirk, and I said, "Yes, bring your camera." The crew showed up the next morning. Small operation, just a reporter, a boom, mic guy, and a cameraman who looked like he hadn't blinked since 2006. We stood right at the boundary. I held up the deed, pointed to the clubhouse, and told the story. How they were built illegally. How they billed me for it. How they tried to steal the one thing I had left of my father. When the segment aired, everything changed. My inbox exploded. Emails from ranchers, former HOA members, even a zoning clerk who said, "Check their original development permit. Something's off." I remember it being pushed through fast, real fast. That's when I knew. We had a crack in their wall, and I was about to swing a sledgehammer through it. The morning after the news segment aired, I had over 300 emails in my inbox. Some were supported by folks around Jasper County, landowners, small business owners, even a retired school teacher who said, "I always knew something smelled rotten at Civic Lakes." But one email stood out. No name, no greeting. Just this: check the HOA's original development permit. I used to work in zoning. That permit. It was rushed. One variance didn't match the map. Look up who signed it. Sarah and I were already working on the lawsuit. But this was gasoline. We dropped everything and filed an immediate records request with the Jasper County Zoning Office. It took 6 days. 6 painfully long days. Then finally, we got it. The original Civic Lakes development permit. And right there, buried under lines of bureaucratic nothing, sat the signature of a zoning official named Roy Thacker, dated 3 years ago. The same Roy who had resigned quietly 1 month after. Why? Because he'd been under investigation for improper approvals. And just like that, our land dispute became something else. Fraud. Sarah leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. "This isn't just a civil case anymore, Jake. This is criminal." But fate wasn't done. 2 nights later, I was locking the barn when I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. Not a truck, not a sheriff cruiser, a black SUV. It rolled up slowly. Headlights stayed on. 2 men in dark suits stepped out like something out of a courtroom drama. One of them, a tall guy with gray at the temples, held out a manila envelope. "You Jake Morgan?" he asked. "Yeah," I replied, already tense. "We're with the state attorney's office," he said. "We'd like to talk." They handed me the envelope. Inside was a subpoena. And a letter? They were opening a criminal investigation into Civic Lakes HOA. The next morning at exactly 6:03 a.m., my phone rang. Sarah. "They're calling a grand jury," she said. "No hello, no lead-up. State's investigating them for zoning, fraud, illegal land use, harassment, maybe even racketeering." I sat at the table staring at my coffee, gone cold. 1 month ago, I was thinking about selling the land and walking away. Now, I was a key witness in a case that might blow the lid off every shady HOA in Texas. Sarah asked me softly, "Are you okay with this?" I didn't hesitate. Let them burn. Later that week, I met with the assistant district attorney, Karen Caldwell. Ironically, her name was Karen, but she was the opposite of every HOA Karen I'd ever known. Straight talk. No spin. "Mr. Morgan," she said, "we believe the Civic Lakes HOA board knowingly submitted falsified zoning approvals to build on land they did not own. You're the first to fight back." She slid a folder across the table. I opened it. Inside were over 30 complaints from other landowners. Some had sold under pressure. Some had no idea their land had even been touched. One man had died shortly after filing a protest. His family never pursued it. I looked up. "Why me?" I asked. Karen didn't blink. "Because you didn't back down. That night, I didn't sleep." I laid in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering how many families had been bullied. How many retirees, widows, farmers had been shoved out quietly while Civic Lakes built its playgrounds on stolen soil. And then, as if on cue, the twist. Dropped, a call from a blocked number. "Jake, it's James Holloway. You don't know me, but I was on the original HOA board. I resigned 2 years ago." I sat upright. I saw the news. I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't prove it. Linda, she buried everything. Why are you calling me now? I asked. Because they're going to lie, he said. They'll spin it all. You need proof, and I have it. We met the next day, off Highway 59, at a worn-out diner with good coffee and bad linoleum. He wore a low ball cap and kept glancing over his shoulder. He slid me a flash drive. I made a copy of the files before I left. Linda kept backups of all the fake maps on her office computer, zoning approvals, emails, even some payments. Why are you helping me? I asked again. James looked away. Because my granddad was a farmer too. And what did they do? To you? That could have been him. That night, Sarah opened the drive. She didn't say a word for 10 straight minutes. Then finally, this is it. The drive had it all. Forged development maps, emails discussing how to redraw property lines to match the vision, and yes, bank transfers, straight from HOA accounts to a consulting firm called Redwood Development Planning. I remembered that name. I'd seen it once, on a banner in Civic Lakes. And in that email from the whistleblower, we sent the drive to the DA first thing next morning. Within 48 hours, a full task force was dispatched. Warrants, seizures, arrests. Linda was the first to be taken into custody, charged with fraud, falsification of records, trespassing, and civil harassment. 2 board members followed. So did a city clerk who buried complaints. And a developer, Redwood's CEO, who got caught moving money through HOA funds. But that wasn't the best part. That came when I found the hidden hatch. Yeah, you heard me. It started with a weed whacker. I was out by the east field, trimming back some of the overgrowth by the old fence line. The clubhouse and tennis courts were gone by then, bulldozed like the shame they were. For the first time in months, the land felt quiet again. Until I saw it. A slab of concrete, half buried under tall grass and cedar roots, about 5 feet wide, cracked, with a rusted metal hatch in the center. No markings, no reason to be there. I dropped the trimmer, walked over, and knelt. The latch was sealed with a rusted padlock. Looked old, but not ancient. Someone had been hiding something. I grabbed a crowbar from the barn. It took a few minutes of cursing and leverage, but the lock finally snapped. The hatch creaked open like the door to hell. Dust rose up. The air was dry, bitter, metallic. A short ladder led into darkness. I clicked on my flashlight and descended. Concrete walls, musty air, low ceiling, a storm shelter maybe. But instead of canned beans or old tools, I found boxes. Dozens of them, waterproof crates stacked 6 feet high, each one labeled HOA Operations Legal Correspondence, Development Plan, Alpha Confidential, Do Not Remove My Heart, thundered in my ears. I opened the first one, cash, bundles of unmarked bills, rubber-banded, stacked like bricks. Tens of thousands of dollars, maybe more. I opened the next maps, emails, receipts, photos of properties with red X's marked over certain plots, including mine. I sat down on the cold floor. For a second, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. This wasn't just a HOA with bad boundaries. This was an operation. They'd been targeting landowners, pushing them out, forging maps, building illegally, funneling cash. This wasn't HOA mismanagement. This was organized racketeering. I bolted back up the ladder and called Sarah. She was at the ranch in under 45 minutes, with the sheriff in tow. The same sheriff who'd once refused to seize my property now stood in stunned silence. We opened the boxes together, one by one. Sarah's voice shook. "Jake, this is bigger than anything we've seen." The sheriff nodded grimly. "This isn't just civil fraud anymore. This is a RICO case. Within hours, a state task force arrived. Forensics teams, evidence specialists, even 2 agents from the Attorney General's office. My barn became the epicenter of a state-level criminal investigation, and for the first time in this entire mess, I wasn't on defense anymore. The fallout came fast. Linda was hit with over a dozen charges. So was the notary who signed the fake zoning maps. So was the contractor who built on illegal land. And the developer, Redwood's CEO, who had funneled money through multiple shell companies tied to HOA accounts. Turns out, that flash drive James Holloway gave me, it linked directly to the cash in the bunker. Emails, approvals, kickbacks. They left a paper trail so obvious it may as well have been written in neon spray paint. But that wasn't all. A week later, I was summoned to Austin. The state attorney general wanted me to testify before the Texas Land Protection Committee, a group pushing for laws to rein in HOA abuse and protect rural landowners. I showed up in my cleanest boots, button-down shirt, and a binder full of hell. I told them everything. Start to finish. The threats, the fake maps, the bulldozers, the padlocks, the lies. I didn't sugarcoat a damn thing. When I was done, one of the senators stood, shook my hand, and said, "Mr. Morgan, you may have just changed property law in this state. Back home, things began to heal. The illegal fences were gone. The fields were green again. The cattle roamed like they owned the place, which technically they kinda did. I fixed the old windmill, the same one my grandfather had built by hand. But I wasn't done. I took one of the abandoned HOA parcels, land they had planned to use for future expansion, and I turned it into a community garden and veterans retreat, free to visit, open to the public. I called it Tom's Field, named after my uncle who lit the fire in this fight, because sometimes, when people stand up and do the right thing, they deserve a piece of the land they helped protect. And me, I finally slept. The kind of sleep that only comes when you've stood your ground. And won. A week after the arrests, the dust started to settle. Literally. The bulldozers had long since hauled off every trace of the HOA's master plan. The field was quiet again. No more fences, no more trespassers, no more pink shirts. I was finally starting to feel peace again. That's when the envelope came. Thick, embossed. No return address. Inside, a letter from the newly restructured Civic Lakes Interim HOA Board. It read, "Dear Mr. Morgan, after a full internal review, we acknowledge that your property was wrongly encroached upon and subject to unauthorized HOA actions. Please find enclosed formal withdrawal of all claims, a public letter of apology, a proposed civil settlement of $1.2 million in exchange for A, dropping all remaining civil charges, B, entering into a 5-year lease agreement allowing HOA access to select facilities on your land." I stared at the paper like it was radioactive. $1.2 million. To shut up, to let them stay, to let the past slide. I picked up the phone and called Sarah. "I don't want their money," I said flatly. "I want my land back, every inch. And I want their damn tennis court gone." 3 weeks later, the bulldozers returned. But this time, they were on my payroll. The clubhouse came down first, then the tennis court, then that smug little walking path they carved into my grandfather's field. Concrete shattered, asphalt peeled, dreams of HOA dominance turned into piles of broken rebar. The field was empty again, the way it should have always been. But fate wasn't done with me yet. It was a Saturday morning. Quiet. The cows were grazing by the pond. I was sipping coffee on the porch, and then I saw it, a luxury black sedan pulling up my driveway. I set down my cup. Out stepped a man who looked like he'd been printed from a Wall Street catalog. Tailored gray suit, shiny black, shoes, leather briefcase. He walked up like he owned the place. "Mr. Morgan," he said, flashing a toothy professional grin. "Jonathan Miles. I'm with Redwood Real Estate Development." I didn't offer my hand. "Let me guess," I said. You're here to buy. He smiled wider. Not quite. I'm here to offer you a deal you won't want to turn down. He stepped into my living room uninvited and slid a thick folder across the table. The logo on the cover? Redwood Development Planning? Same company we found in the emails, same company tied to the HOA's hidden funding schemes. I didn't open it. Not yet. I believe in transparency, he said slickly. We want to buy the ranch and the surrounding acreage. Our investors are ready to offer $5.6 million. I raised an eyebrow. $5.6 million? He nodded. All cash. No contingencies. We want to rebuild. Legally this time. A gated community, a luxury lifestyle brand, with your blessing, of course. I didn't touch the folder. I didn't even blink. You were in on it, I said. You worked with Linda? We were consultants, he replied smoothly. She may have mishandled things, but the vision remains. I looked out the window. At the barn my grandfather built with calloused hands. At the windmill I just fixed. At the flag waving over the old cedar post, the one I planted the day I tore down their phony HOA sign, then I pushed the proposal right back across the table. I'm not selling. Jonathan's jaw twitched. Mr. Morgan, be reasonable. No. You are reasonable, I snapped. This land doesn't need your golf courses and community pools. It needs cattle, it needs dirt, and it needs to be left the hell alone. He stood, rebuttoned his jacket, and gave me a condescending nod. You'll regret this. I stared him down. I already did. That's why I'm not making the same mistake twice. He left without another word. I watched the dust kick up behind. His car like the end of a bad movie, but I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. That same afternoon, I called the state attorney's office and told them about Jonathan Miles and Redwood's new offer. Turns out, they were already under investigation. The flash drive James gave me had more on Redwood than anyone realized. Illegal partnerships, zoning bribes, shadow consultants. A month later, their corporate accounts were frozen. Several senior partners indicted. Jonathan? Disbarred and banned from development projects in the state of Texas. The final nail in the coffin. 6 months passed. The ranch was alive again. I started offering horseback tours on weekends. School kids came out to visit the garden. Veterans sat under the big oak tree sharing stories, finding peace. And me, I stood out in the field where the HOA once built their empire of concrete and lies. And I smiled, because now, everyone knew the name Morgan Ranch, not just a spot on the map, but a symbol of grit, of justice, of knowing when to fight and never backing down. I thought it was all over. Redwood collapsed. Linda got arrested. The tennis court was demolished. The land was returned to its rightful owner. I began to live my life again. Mornings were spent walking cattle to pasture, afternoons teaching kids how to ride horses. Evenings listening to old veterans swap stories beneath the oaks in Tom's field. The community garden I named after my uncle, the man who first lit the spark of resistance. The Morgan Ranch wasn't just defended, it was reborn. Then one autumn morning, while dew still clung to the barbed wire, I heard a knock at the door. Not a car. Not the wind. A knock 3 times, firm and deliberate. I opened the door. Standing there was a silver-haired man in a gray suit, polished leather shoes, holding a thick envelope. Mr. Morgan, that's me. I'm a representative of the Texas State Commission for Land Reform and Rural Protection. I narrowed my eyes. What's this about? He held out the envelope. We'd like to invite you to serve as a senior advisor on the new state program for protecting rural property owners. Thanks to your case, we've been able to draft a new bill, one aimed at curbing HOA overreach and defending independent landholders. I opened the envelope. Inside was an official invitation, a handwritten letter from the state attorney general, and a map on it, 17 scattered zones across Texas, places where other HOAs were now under investigation for similar conduct to Civic Lakes. Under each red marker was a note. We need someone like you, Someone who can stand tall when everything is stacked against them. I stood in silence for a long while, then nodded. All right, but I'm not leaving this ranch. The man smiled. We don't need you to leave. We just need you to keep doing what you've been doing, telling the truth. A few weeks later, a reporter who'd covered the Civic Lakes story came back. He wanted to write a follow-up, this time not just about me, but about all the others, who were finally finding their voices again. When he asked if I'd been scared, standing up to a system built to silence folks like me, I simply looked out toward the field where my grandfather once plowed with his bare hands and said, "Course I was scared, but I was more scared of doing nothing at all. And if you're reading or watching this story, maybe you too have been bullied by an HOA, intimidated, made to feel alone. You're not alone. I stood up, and you can too. Because sometimes land isn't just land. It's history. It's bloodline. It's the one thing money can't buy back. This story might be over, but the fight against greed dressed in legalese goes on. And if someone's knocking on your door one day, wearing a pink polo, flashing HOA authority, and waving a bill in your face, remember my words. Check the maps, check the records, and if they're wrong, fight.